Dachau. This concentration camp operated from March 1933 to April 1945. During this period, more than 200,000 people entered its gates. Jews, Roma, political dissidents, and homosexuals. All of them would be deprived of their freedom, and many would die there. Let's delve into the torture, experiments, and massacres that took place at Dachau, the first German concentration camp. The Dachau concentration camp was the prototype upon which the Nazis based their efforts to establish more than 15,000 detention centers across Europe. These had different purposes: to imprison opponents of the National Socialist regime, to control certain groups, to use prisoners for forced labor, or, in the worst cases, to exterminate the captives. But what was the origin of these phantom territories? On January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler took office as German Chancellor. The followers of National Socialism sustained a dictatorial government through the implementation of policies of public terror. The proscription and harassment of opposition parties played a fundamental role, and with the aim of housing their so-called enemies, the concentration camps were inaugurated. This is how the Dachau camp came into being. On March 22nd, 1933, the first prisoners arrived at the facility, located on the grounds of an abandoned gunpowder and projectile factory. Theodor Eicke, the camp commandant, imposed a statute for the detention center. It contained brutal punitive rules for inmates who committed even the slightest infraction. It also detailed a series of regulatory orders for the SS, the protection squad that guarded the site. The code enforced the full sovereignty of the SS over the inmates, stipulated in despotism and intimidation. One of Theodor Eicke's most famous disciples was Rudolf Höss, who would become the commandant of the Auschwitz extermination camp. The latter would stain his hands with the blood of 3 million people. It was in 1935 that the Führer ordered the implementation of the mechanism devised by Eicke in all concentration camps as a political tool for the exercise of terror. This would be the order of magnitude that would govern until the end of the war. The camps came under the absolute control of the Gestapo, the Nazi political police, and the SS under the newly promoted commander-in-chief, Heinrich Himmler. During 1937, a project to expand the camp for members of the SS was initiated. Simultaneously, construction began on another prison camp with a capacity of up to 6,000 inmates. The captives were used as labor to build the next prison under extremely vulnerable physical conditions. Thus, legions of prisoners were soon brought in, thanks to a collective detention program, Operation Reluctant to work in the Reich. The destitute and unemployed Germans became potential targets for roundup and death in the extermination camps. Anyone deemed undesirable would be eliminated. It is worth noting that, in its first year of operation, the Dachau camp was limited exclusively to the imprisonment of political leaders opposed to Nazism. However, a succession of events expanded its range of prisoners. These were the promulgation of the Nuremberg racial laws in 1935 and Kristallnacht, along with the German occupation of Austria in 1938. The Nuremberg racial laws refer to 2 regulations promulgated on September 15, 1935. The Reich Citizenship Law and the Law for the Protection of German Blood and Honor. These laws crystallized the theories of ethnic supremacy of the Aryan race developed by the Nazis in the formation of the Third Reich. The Reich Citizenship Law defined as citizens only those who had German blood or German ancestry. In this sense, Jews were considered members of a distinct race. As a result, they were no longer members of the Third Reich citizenship. They lacked full rights and were exempted from the country's political life. The Law for the Protection of German Blood and Honor stipulated a rule against racial dishonor. It prohibited marriages between citizens of German blood or kinship and Jews. Thus, the Führer's followers were freed from something they abhorred: mixed-race offspring. The National Socialists asserted that these children corrupted the purity of the Teutonic ethnic group. The term Kristallnacht refers to two events that occurred during the night of November 9th to 10th, 1938. During these events, the National Socialist Party coordinated a wave of anti-Semitic attacks. The broken glass came from the windows of Jewish-run shops, which were smashed throughout Teutonic cities. The following day, approximately 11,000 men of Jewish descent were admitted to Dachau. The German occupation of Austria was linked to the arrival of the Nazis on March 12, 1938. They were enthusiastically welcomed, and Austria was annexed as part of German territory the following day. This period brought with it the entry of anti-Semitic legislation into Austria. These circumstances generated a wave of new inmates at Dachau due to the promotion of the criminalization of the Jewish community. Due to this reorientation, the Dachau Center was temporarily classified as a concentration camp. The camp consisted of two sectors: the camp area itself and the crematorium area. The perimeter of the site was made up of 32 barracks, one of which was reserved solely for clergymen who had opposed the Führer's doctrine. The entire camp was enclosed by an electrified barbed wire fence, a ditch, and a wall with 7 observation towers. The administrative area of the camp was located at the main entrance guardhouse. A series of support buildings protruded from the camp surface, including the kitchen, showers, workshops, and laundry. The prison section was known as the bunker. The corridor between the prison cells and the prison kitchen was used for the summary execution of prisoners. From the beginning, the Jewish population was treated more harshly at Dachau, even in cases where they had been detained for other reasons. The SS members were fanatical about National Socialist ideology, which is why they vented their fury on prisoners of Jewish descent even more than on other vulnerable groups. The mass deportations of Jews, and initially also of Gypsies, had their direct objective: their extermination. At that time, there was almost no selection system. When the Dachau camp became complex and multi-purpose, the selection of Jews in good physical condition began, that is, those who could be employed as workers. The course of the war required it, and these had a greater chance of survival under such adverse conditions. However, there was a conflict of interests between the regular army and the SS over what was more important: the final solution or victory in the conflict. Later, the need to avoid the absolute defeat of the German troops, as well as their supply of supplies and ammunition, became paramount. The crematorium section was built in 1942 in conjunction with the central camp. It housed an old incinerator and a more recent one, Barrack X, which was equipped with a gas chamber. Inmates were also subjected to a selective process. Those who appeared too sick or weakened to continue their work were sent to the Hartheim extermination camp by euthanasia near Linz, Austria. The number of inmates executed by gas chamber at Hartheim ranged from more than 2,500 casualties. There were also mass murders by firing squad. These initially took place in the bunker courtyard, and later in a firing range designated only for the SS. Thousands of Dachau prisoners were killed there, including 4,000 Russian prisoners of war who had been captured during the offensive against the Soviet Union. On the other hand, one should not ignore the existence of a section designated for extremely gruesome medical research. From 1942 until the end of World War II, German doctors performed aberrant medical experiments on the inmates. These scientists developed analyses to investigate the consequences of hypothermia and exposure to high altitudes. They also conducted tests to purify seawater. These attempts were intended to benefit German airmen who were on bombing raids or who fell into the cold ocean. Furthermore, Nazi doctors studied methods to determine the effectiveness of medicines against diseases such as malaria and tuberculosis. Hundreds of inmates were severely wounded and killed after being subjected to these vile tests. Another kind of suffering that prisoners had to endure was forced labor. Detainees were used to perform caretaking duties at the center on various building projects and in menial crafts for the benefit of the camp. Inmates paved paths, dug gravel pits, and drained marshy areas. During the war, the forced labor performed by camp inmates became essential for the growing production of war weapons. In 1944, 140 satellite camps were opened to expand the war industry under the auspices of Dachau, near military factories scattered throughout southern Germany. These were located mainly in the southern part of Bavaria, where the inmates were dedicated almost exclusively to weapons manufacturing. Thousands of inmates were forced to endure extreme work days that left them dying from exhaustion. The number of these workers increased at the Dachau detention center when the Germans moved thousands of prisoners from the eastern camps into the German interior through the ominous death marches. The death marches were a response to the Russian advance on the Eastern Front. Most of the camps located in the Nazi-occupied areas of Eastern Europe had to be evacuated. The failure of Operation Barbarossa resulted in the frustration of the Third Reich's expansionist expectations, for which the camp inmates had to pay with their lives during their forced mobilization. As the Nazi failure in the confrontation with the Soviet Union grew, the death marches became more fateful and desperate. During these diabolical pilgrimages of desolation, the Nazis forced the inmates to walk many kilometers, but the prisoners had no energy, rest, or food. Those who showed signs of being unable to maintain the walk were immediately shot by their guards. If not by bullet impact, the deaths of the unfortunates could have been from starvation, hypothermia, or exhaustion. On April 29, 1945, American troops liberated the Dachau concentration camp, 12 years after its construction. The situation there was deplorable, as they found more than 36 rail cars filled with rotting corpses, along with 32,000 inmates piled up and motionless from lack of energy. Most of them would die of starvation. Motivated by the horrific images left by the terror of Nazism, members of the 45th Infantry Division injured and executed concentration camp guards. This act of revenge became known as the Dachau Massacre. The Americans ordered German civilians living in the vicinity to witness firsthand the terror they had lived with for so long. Between 1933 and 1945, more than 200,000 prisoners were held at Dachau. The number of those executed is difficult to ascertain, given that those close to elimination were not recorded. Nor is it known how many did not survive the evacuation. Experts on the subject assert that at least 25,000 inmates underwent the calamitous experience of the death marches. It is estimated that, by the time it was closed, 41,500 human beings had died there. That same April 29th, those who survived organized a Dachau camp committee. This committee would be vigorously relaunched 10 years later, in 1955, as the International Dachau Committee. A monument was erected in honor of the victims of Nazi Germany. Its goal was to restore the identity of the fallen by fostering their memory in the contemporary world. It's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us until the end. We look forward to seeing you again in our next video.